And we're joined by Ellias Aghili Dehnavi, Abbasid Foundation Fund. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting it. So, what should we make of the news of presidential helicopter crash?
Well, it was a real sudden accident. I mean, the president was technically being deported for a diplomatic event in the Republic of Azerbaijan, Baku. And they were about to have a ceremony regarding a dam. And they also had a very friendly conversation with the president of the Republic, Mr. Aliyev. And on the way back, they were also witnessing a new project, monitoring the, opening ceremony of a new project. And they were observing the project process within a helicopter. And everything happened on the way back home. And the helicopter had to land. It was technically the first news that the news agency closer to the government published, that the helicopter had to have an emergency landing. But then it was announced that the helicopter had some technical problems and it had crashed. The helicopter is from a 412 family. It was produced by the United States and Canada together jointly. It was first used in 1979 by the British Royal Guard. And then two of these helicopters were bought by the Iranian government, and they were mostly used to transfer the officials for different diplomatic ceremonies. But till now, everything is hidden under a thick layer of fog, and no one knows what's going on. The rescue process is still going on, but people, media, and everybody from the world is waiting for updates. Till now, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Russian Federation, and the European Union has announced their will to help and participate in the rescue process. The Copernicus system has been relaunched, and they are now helping the Iranian government to relocate the site of the crash.
Right. So what we know now for sure is that President Ibrahim Ra'isi is missing. That's all we know for sure. But, well, given the nature of what could have happened, and hoping for the best, if President Ra'isi suffers injuries which would make him unfit to perform his duties, what happens next? What's the procedure in Iran?
Well, there is a formal procedure for such incidents mentioned in the Constitution. Article 131 states that if anything happens to the president and makes him unfit to continue his role as the president of the country, the head of the judiciary, together with the head of the parliament, and with the positive votes of the supreme leader, should convey the role of the presidency to the first minister of the country. And at the moment, Dr. Mohber is the first minister of the country. And for a period of 50 days, the first minister should rule the country until a new election is being held to choose the new president.
Mm-hmm. And how important is president in Iran's political system?
Well, that's a complicated question, to be honest. I mean, the president is technically responsible to implement the constitution, and also for any executive order or any executive, anything that is executive technically. So you see, it's a very important role. And the president is responsible for international negotiations, for diplomatic ceremonies and events. And he simply should rule the country. I mean, he's the person who is in charge for everything. Although there are other institutes responsible for implementation of the constitution, but the presidency office is the main source of implementation and the main source of action in the country. So it's a very high-profile and important position, and it can easily bring the country to the edge of a chaos if anything happens to the president. at least in terms of a psychological upheaval, or let's say some social upheaval till things settle down.
And yet he's not the leader of the country, right?
Well, the political system in Iran is really complicated. We've got the supreme leader, then we've got the parliament, the judiciary office, and then we've got the office of the president. These three bodies are the main, source of action. Like I'm trying to simplify everything here. The supreme leader is responsible for, most of the important and vital decisions and actions in the country. But the implementation of those decisions are being divided between these three houses, or between these three sources of power. The parliament is responsible to make new laws or the current affairs of the country, while the office of the president and the judiciary control over its actions. And it's something like a mutual monitoring system that we have in Iran. Like each source of power monitors the other source. But this is the law. This is the constitution. In action, things can be really complicated. There can be several players involved when it comes to the execution of power.
Right. So, lastly, how would you characterize President Ra'isi and his political career so far?
Well, President Ra'isi started his career years ago. Nearly after the Islamic Revolution, he was an important, figure in the judicial system back then. And the opposition criticizes some of his activities. The Iranian opposition criticized some of his activities back then in the 70s and early 80s. He's a hardliner from the hardliner front, and some people also relate him to the front of resistance. That is, they are more severe than the hardliners. Before becoming the president, he was the head of judiciary system in Iran. He's a judge, and he was also a religious figure in Mashhad, which is now suffering from a flood. So he has been shifted in different positions, but the local sources always say that he has a close, a relation with the current supreme leader, and also some important military figures and bodies in Iran. He was popular, or let's say he is. We pray and we hope for his safety. He's a popular figure among IRGC and also the other bodies close to the government.
Mm-hmm. Ellias Aghili Dehnavi, Abbasid Foundation founder, thank you so much for shedding more light on current events in Iran. Thank you.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for inviting me, and have a lovely evening.
You too.